It started with a phone call. The number was unknown, the voice smooth, deliberate, every word carefully chosen. Sarah Jensen, the man had said, like he was reading my name off a script. I've been following your work. There's an audition, something underground, something real. He didn't introduce himself right away, and I should have hung up then. I should have asked how he got my number, why he was speaking to me like we already knew each other. But I didn't, because I was desperate. Because I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the break I had been waiting for. Victor Langley. That was the name he gave me, his voice low and steady, full of quiet confidence. I didn't recognize it, but he spoke like I should, like he was someone important, someone who had the power to make or break a career. He told me about the project, experimental, immersive, something that would push boundaries. Come alone, like he had said, and I should have caught the warning hidden in those words. But I went. The warehouse sat at the edge of the city, surrounded by empty lots and crumbling buildings. The kind of place where the streetlights didn't work, and the air smelled like rust and rain. I hesitated outside the door, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. The address matched. The door was unlocked, but there was something wrong with the silence pressing against my ears, something unnatural about the way the darkness pooled around the edges of the building. Still, I stepped inside. The space was massive, stretching out like the hollowed-out ribs of a dead thing. The air was thick with dust, the scent of old wood, and something metallic clinging to the back of my throat. The stage was at the far end, a skeletal structure of unfinished planks and sagging curtains, half-built as if abandoned mid-performance. Spotlights dangled from overhead rigs, their weak glow flickering, casting jagged shadows that twitched when I moved. A few cameras stood on tripods, their lenses staring, reflecting the dim light like unblinking eyes. Watching. I swallowed hard. Hello? My voice felt too small, swallowed by the vast emptiness. I took a few hesitant steps forward, my footsteps echoing, stretching longer than they should have, like the building itself was holding on to the sound. Something creaked behind me. I turned too fast, my breath catching in my throat. A door slightly ajar now, just a crack of blackness beyond the frame. Had it been open before? I wasn't sure. Victor? I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then, a whisper of fabric, a shift in the air. Not close, but not far either. I took a step back. My pulse pounded at my temples, every instinct screaming at me to leave, to turn around and walk out the way I came. But I hesitated, because if I walked away now, I might never get another opportunity like this. I had been chasing auditions for months, scraping together rent money by waiting tables, smiling through clenched teeth while customers snapped their fingers at me. What if this was real? I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling just slightly as I pulled it from my pocket. No signal. Of course, a low click. The sound came from the darkness beyond the open door, a mechanical noise, deliberate. A camera? I took another step back. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Blackness swallowed everything. The air shifted, the silence stretching impossibly long. Then, a breath. Not mine. Close. My own breath hitched, my body locking in place. Every nerve screaming to move, to run, to do something. But then hands grabbed me. A sharp yank backward. A cloth over my mouth, something thick and suffocating. The scent cloying, chemical. I thrashed, my heels scraping against the concrete, my fingers clawing at the grip around my arms. But it was too strong, too practiced. My lungs burned. Somewhere in the dark, a voice whispered, so close it slipped beneath my skin. Welcome to the show. The struggle lasted only seconds. The darkness folded in, swallowing me whole. And the first act began. The first thing I felt was the cold. It crept in before I was even fully conscious, wrapping around my skin like a second layer, sinking into my bones. My head throbbed, a dull, pulsing ache at the base of my skull. The kind of pain that felt wrong, not just from sleeping in a bad position or drinking too much the night before. No, this was deeper, heavier, laced with something chemical, something forced. I wasn't supposed to be here. That thought came next, slamming into my mind the second I started to wake up, breaking through the fog with an icy stab of fear. I tried to move, but my body was slow to respond, heavy and uncooperative, my limbs stiff from lying on the hard floor for too long. The ground beneath me was rough, wooden, and smelled like dust and something older, something stale. Then I opened my eyes. For a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The room was dim, the only light coming from a single exposed bulb hanging overhead, its weak glow flickering, swaying slightly as if it had just been disturbed. The walls were close, too close, pressing in on all sides, made of old, warped planks that looked as though they had been ripped from a decaying theater stage. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick and unmoving, and the air was filled with a scent that made my stomach twist. Something metallic, something wrong. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, and that's when I saw them. The shoes, rows and rows of them, lined up along the far wall, placed with careful precision as if waiting for their owners to return. Sneakers, heels, dress shoes, all different sizes, all different styles. But it wasn't just the sheer number of them that made my skin crawl. It was the details. The way some were scuffed and worn, while others looked barely touched, as if they had only just been taken off someone's feet. The way some had dried mud clinging to the soles. The way a few were splattered with something darker, something that had dried into crusted patches against the leather. And some were too small. Children's shoes. My stomach clenched, and I forced myself to look away, my breath coming too fast, too shallow. This wasn't an audition. This wasn't some underground film project. I had been taken. I had been trapped. I reached for my pocket, fumbling for my phone, but my hands found nothing but the worn fabric of my jeans. Gone. Of course. My bag, my jacket, everything I had walked in with. Gone. A sound. Soft, barely there, but unmistakable. A slow, rhythmic creak. I froze, my ears straining, trying to locate the source. It was coming from somewhere outside the room, beyond the wooden door at the far end. The door was closed, but there was a thin gap at the bottom, just enough for a sliver of light to seep in. I forced myself to move, to crawl forward, ignoring the way my limbs trembled, the way my breath felt too loud in the thick silence. I reached the door and pressed my ear against it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth, each step accompanied by the faint creak of old floorboards. Someone was out there. And then, a voice, low, measured, almost amused. "You're awake." I jerked back, my pulse slamming against my ribs, my breath hitching. He was right outside the door. Victor. I squeezed my eyes shut for half a second, trying to steady myself, trying to think. I couldn't panic. Panic would get me killed. A soft chuckle. "I was wondering when you'd come to." The door handle rattled slightly, like he was testing it, like he was savoring the moment. "Most people wake up screaming. You didn't. That's interesting." I didn't say anything. A pause, then, "I know you're listening, Sarah." A slow, crawling chill spread through me at the sound of my name. "I want to show you something," he continued, his voice calm, patient, like a teacher explaining a lesson to a student. "You came here for a role, didn't you? For a performance?" A quiet hum, as if he was considering something. "You're going to get one. But first, I need you to understand what's at stake." I heard something shift, the faint rustling of fabric, the scrape of metal against wood. Then the door creaked open just an inch, just enough for me to see the edge of his silhouette, a sliver of dark clothing, a hint of movement. A hand reached through the gap, and something small, something smooth and hard, rolled into the room, coming to a stop just inches from my knee. I stared at it. A tooth. Not a prop. Not fake. Real. I scrambled back so fast I hit the wall, my breath coming in sharp, jagged gasps. Victor let out a soft sigh, the kind people made when they were disappointed but not surprised. "You'll want to stand up now," he said. "It's time for your first scene." And then the door swung open. He stood there, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway beyond, his presence filling the space in a way that made it impossible to breathe. He wasn't large, wasn't physically imposing, but there was something about him, something in the way he carried himself, the way his head tilted slightly as he watched me, that made it clear. He was in control. He held something small between his fingers, something silver that caught the light, a scalpel, not a knife, not something crude or reckless, a tool meant for precision. My stomach twisted. Victor stepped forward, slow and unhurried, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're going to follow me," he said simply, "or I start cutting now." For a long, terrible moment, I couldn't move, but then I did, because I didn't have a choice. I stood on shaking legs, my entire body screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something, anything, but his gaze held me in place, a quiet, patient warning. He turned and walked out into the hallway, leaving the door open behind him. I hesitated, just for a second. Then I followed, and the show began. I stepped out of the prop room, my bare feet pressing against the cold, uneven concrete of the hallway beyond. The air was different out here, drier, filled with the scent of dust and something faintly metallic, like old blood soaked into the walls long before I arrived. The lighting was dim, flickering in places where exposed wires snaked along the ceiling, casting jittery, shifting shadows that seemed to move even when everything else was still. Victor walked ahead of me, his footsteps calm, measured, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't look back to check if I was following. He didn't need to. He knew I would, because there was no other option. My mind raced as I moved forward, my pulse a relentless drum against my ribs. I couldn't outrun him, not yet. I had seen the scalpel in his hand, the way he held it lightly between his fingers, as if it were an extension of himself. If I tried to run, I wouldn't get more than a few steps before he caught me, and I had the sickening feeling that if he had to chase me, he wouldn't be as patient as he was now. So I played along. The hallway stretched long and narrow, the walls lined with old, tattered posters, their edges curling and torn. At first, they seemed like ordinary theater advertisements, names of plays, black and white images of actors in dramatic poses. But as I passed them, I noticed something wrong. The faces were scratched out, not scribbled over with ink or paint, but gouged out entirely, deep slashes that carved away the eyes, the mouths, leaving nothing but faceless figures frozen in mid-performance. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep moving. Victor finally stopped at the end of the hallway, beside a heavy wooden door with a tarnished brass handle. He placed a hand on it, then glanced back at me for the first time since we left the prop room. His gaze was steady, searching, as if he was waiting for something. Some kind of reaction, some sign that I understood what was coming. I refused to give him one. The corner of his mouth twitched, just slightly, as if he found that amusing. Then he pushed the door open. The room beyond was larger than I expected, wider, with a high ceiling crisscrossed by exposed beams. The floor was smooth concrete, scuffed and stained in places, and the walls were lined with dark curtains, stretching from floor to ceiling, their thick fabric swallowing the light. A single wooden chair sat in the center of the room, positioned directly beneath a hanging spotlight that cast a cold, sterile glow. But that wasn't what made my stomach lurch. It was the cameras. They stood on tripods placed in precise angles around the chair, their lenses gleaming in the dim light. A few were mounted on the walls, tiny red dots blinking at me like watching eyes. And then I saw the screens. Lining the far wall, they flickered to life as I entered, displaying grainy, high-contrast images of the room itself from multiple angles. I could see myself stepping forward, Victor behind me, the wooden chair waiting in the center like an execution seat. The delay in the feed was slight, almost imperceptible, but I could feel it, just enough to make everything feel unreal, like I was already watching my own performance before it had even begun. Victor gestured to the chair. "Sit." I didn't move. His head tilted slightly as if he had expected that. His fingers curled around the scalpel, not tightly, not threateningly, but in a way that reminded me how close he was, how quickly he could close the distance between us. Don't make this difficult, he said, his voice quiet, measured. I'd rather not start cutting before the audience is settled in. My stomach twisted. The audience. I swallowed, my throat dry, my mind screaming at me to find a way out, to fight, to do something. But I knew I had no leverage. Not yet. So I forced my feet forward, one slow, deliberate step at a time, until I reached the chair. The wood was cool as I lowered myself onto it, and as soon as I did, Victor moved. The restraints snapped into place before I could react. Thick leather straps wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, securing me to the chair with practiced efficiency. He didn't struggle, didn't fumble. He had done this before. Panic clawed at my chest, my pulse hammering in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral, refusing to let him see how much I wanted to scream. Victor stepped back, admiring his work, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black remote. He pressed a button, the camera's whirred adjusting, and then the sound started. Soft at first, distant, almost like static filtering through unseen speakers. Then it grew louder, stronger, forming a low, rhythmic murmur. Whispers. I tensed. The screens flickered again, the images shifting, and suddenly I wasn't the only thing being broadcast. There were messages, lines of text scrolling rapidly at the bottom of the screens, dozens of them, then hundreds, updating so fast they blurred together. She looks scared. Good, I like when they're scared. What's her name? Sarah Jensen. She's pretty. I give her 2 acts. Nah, she won't last past the first. Look at her hands. My stomach dropped. They were watching, not just Victor, not just some hidden producer behind the cameras, an entire audience. Victor's voice cut through the noise. You understand now, don't you? I forced my eyes up, meeting his gaze. I refused to let him see how much I wanted to break. He smiled. Good. That'll make this more fun. He turned slightly, adjusting something on one of the tripods, and the angle of the cameras shifted again. The screens displayed me from multiple perspectives, each one capturing a different part of the scene. The tightness in my jaw, the tension in my fingers, the way my chest rose and fell too quickly. Victor walked behind me, his voice close to my ear. This is your first scene, Sarah, he murmured. Make it count. A sharp click, and the show began. I could hear them. Not just Victor, not just the faint whir of the cameras adjusting their angles. Beyond the screens, beyond the thick curtains that lined the walls, beyond the suffocating air pressing against my skin, I could hear them. The audience. It was a strange kind of sound, one that didn't belong in a place like this. A soft, distant murmur, shifting like wind through dead leaves. At first I thought it was just more static, just the distorted hum of the equipment. But then I started picking out words, half-formed, whisper-thin sentences slipping through unseen speakers. Too many voices layered on top of each other, a shapeless mass of anticipation. They weren't speaking to me. They weren't speaking at all. They were reacting. To me, to my breathing, to the way my fingers twitched against the restraints, to the way my shoulders stiffened when Victor moved just behind me. I forced myself to stay still, because I understood now. It wasn't just about the cameras. It wasn't just about the sick game Victor was playing. This was a production, a performance, and I was the entertainment. Victor had orchestrated everything, the lighting, the positioning, the script I wasn't even aware I was following, and they were watching. Not just passively, not like a normal audience sitting in velvet seats, waiting for the curtains to rise. No, this was something else, something worse. The messages kept coming. She's trying not to cry. I like that. She still thinks she has a chance. Make her talk. I want to hear her beg. How long until she breaks? Victor let out a soft sigh, his fingers drumming lightly against the back of the chair. You're holding up better than I expected, he said, his voice smooth, almost lazy. Most of them, he gestured vaguely at the screens, as if referring to all the people who had come before me. Start crying as soon as the audience gets involved. I said nothing. I was still trying to process what this was. The cameras, the chat, the countdown still ticking in the corner of the screen. This wasn't just some secret torture room in the back of an abandoned warehouse. This was live. This was broadcasting. My stomach turned. There were stories, urban legends whispered in dark corners of the internet, late-night discussions in dimly lit apartments over glowing laptop screens, places you weren't supposed to go, sites buried so deep in the web that normal people never found them, where things that weren't supposed to be seen were streamed for those sick enough to watch. I had never believed them. Not really, but I believed them now. Victor circled around to face me, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes flicking between mine, searching. Let's get to know each other a little better, shall we? He crouched down so we were at eye level, his presence filling every inch of space between us. Tell me something, Sarah. My name in his mouth sent a shiver through me. Do you know how many people are watching right now? I swallowed hard. He smiled, slow and deliberate, tilting his head slightly as he gestured toward the screens. Go on. Take a guess. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. But I did. And what I saw made my breath catch. The number sat in the top right corner of the screen, bold white text against a deep black background. 11,827 viewers. My vision blurred at the edges. It didn't feel real. That was more than an audience. More than a theater full of people waiting for a show to begin. That was an event. A gathering of thousands, hidden behind anonymous usernames. Faceless spectators placing bets, sending comments, waiting for something to happen. Something to be done to me. I clenched my jaw, forcing down the rising wave of nausea, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Victor watched me with open amusement, like he was watching a child piece together the rules of a game they had already lost. Surprised? He asked. Don't be. You're the star tonight, Sarah. The main attraction. He straightened, stepping back toward the cameras, tilting one slightly to adjust the angle. The audience loves a good performance, he continued, as if this were a simple matter of fact. They love tension, anticipation. They love seeing the moment someone realizes there's no way out. I gritted my teeth, my pulse slamming against my ribs. He wanted me to break. That was what they were waiting for. They wanted to see me shatter, to beg, to scream, but I wouldn't give them that. I couldn't. Victor leaned against the edge of the table, tapping a finger against his chin, considering. You haven't said much since you woke up, he observed. Quiet types usually last longer, but they're not as much fun. He turned, lifting the remote again, pressing a button. The screens flickered, the camera angles changed, and then I saw something new. Not just myself, another room, another chair, another person. The figure was slumped forward, their body limp against the restraints, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Their clothes were torn, their skin covered in dark, bruised patches, a thin trickle of something dried and dark running from the corner of their mouth. I couldn't tell if they were breathing. Victor followed my gaze, then smiled. Ah, you weren't supposed to see that yet. The chat exploded. She sees them now. Bet she screams. Think they'll last the night? I barely heard it. My focus was locked on the screen, on the stillness of the person strapped to the chair, the unmistakable finality of it. They had been here before me, and they hadn't made it out. A slow, creeping chill spread through me as realization settled into my bones. This wasn't a one-time event. This wasn't a last-minute decision, some spur-of-the-moment abduction. This was a cycle, a system, a business. Victor stepped closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. This is the part where you realize what you are. I clenched my fists. Property, he murmured. A piece of the show. No, I refused to let that be true. I wasn't just another name, another body strapped to a chair, waiting for someone to decide my fate. I was getting out of here. Victor's fingers curled around the back of my chair, his grip firm, his breath warm against my skin. Let's start the next scene, shall we? The countdown on the screen kept ticking down. 4 minutes. 3. I was running out of time. Time was slipping away, each second bleeding into the next. The countdown on the screen ticking lower and lower, pushing me toward an ending I didn't understand, but one I knew wouldn't be in my favor. The weight of the straps around my wrists and ankles felt heavier, tighter, as if they were slowly pulling me deeper into the chair, into this sick performance. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my ribs, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay focused, to find something, anything, I could use to my advantage. Victor was watching me, his expression calm, expectant, as if he already knew exactly how this was going to play out. Maybe he did. Maybe he had done this so many times before that every reaction, every desperate attempt at escape had become predictable, routine. Maybe that was why he looked almost bored now, waiting for me to give him something interesting. I wasn't going to give him that. I wasn't going to break for him or for them. I turned my gaze toward the screens again, scanning the fast-moving messages, the shifting camera angles, the flickering countdown. The audience was waiting. They wanted more. They wanted action. The chat was filled with bets on whether I'd scream, whether I'd cry, whether I'd fight. Victor wanted a show. I'd give him one. I let my shoulders relax slightly, exhaling slow, pretending that something inside me had finally snapped. I dropped my head forward, letting my hair fall into my face, my body going slack against the chair. I heard the slight shift in Victor's breathing. Interest. He stepped closer. There it is, he murmured, that moment of acceptance. I didn't move, didn't respond, but my fingers were moving. The buckle around my right wrist was old, worn down, the leather stiff and cracked. I could feel the weak point, the place where it was fraying, where the edge had started to curl. My nails dug into it, pulling, working the strap loose millimeter by millimeter, careful not to make any sudden movements. Victor leaned down slightly, his fingers brushing the side of my face, tilting my chin up so he could look at me properly. His touch was gentle, almost thoughtful, like an artist inspecting a piece before making the first cut. "There's beauty in surrender," he said softly, "but there's more beauty in—" I moved before he could finish the sentence. With everything I had, I wrenched my right hand free, the leather strap snapping apart, the buckle clattering to the floor. Before Victor could react, I grabbed the scalpel from his hand, twisting it out of his grip, the blade catching the light for a fraction of a second before I drove it forward. He jerked back just in time. The scalpel barely grazed him, slicing through the sleeve of his dark shirt, but it was enough to send him stumbling. His foot caught on the edge of the chair, throwing him off balance for the briefest moment. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, yanking my other wrist free, ripping at the straps around my ankles. My breath was ragged, adrenaline flooding every inch of my body, my vision narrowing to a single point: the door. Victor recovered fast, his calm mask cracking just slightly, frustration flickering across his face as he reached for me. "You shouldn't have done that." I ran. The room blurred around me, the sound of the audience in the speakers turning into a frantic roar, excitement buzzing through the chat as I sprinted for the hallway. "She's running. Oh, this is good. He's letting her think she can escape." I didn't care. I didn't look back. I tore down the hallway, the cold air burning my lungs, my bare feet slamming against the concrete. The old posters on the walls blurred past me, faceless figures staring from the tattered paper, watching, waiting. I knew Victor was behind me, knew he was fast, knew that if he caught me, the next scene would be something far worse than what he had planned before. The hallway split ahead, 2 doors, one slightly ajar, the other locked. I went for the open one. The room beyond was different, smaller, cramped. A dressing room, maybe, long abandoned. A single mirror sat against the wall, its surface smudged with handprints, its edges cracked. Costumes hung from a rack in the corner, some old, some new, some splattered with something dark and dried. A dead end. No, I wasn't going to let this be the end. I spun, searching for anything, any way out. But before I could move, Victor was there. He stepped into the doorway, blocking the exit, breathing hard but still composed, still in control. "You had your moment," he said, shaking his head slightly, as if disappointed. "You played your part. But this—" He gestured at me, standing there with the scalpel still clenched in my shaking fingers. "This isn't how it ends." I backed up, my shoulder pressing against the cold glass of the mirror. My pulse was a drum in my ears, my grip tightening around the blade. I'm not playing your game. Victor exhaled through his nose, like I was exhausting him. But you are, he said. You've been playing it since you walked through that door. The chat was still going, messages flashing across the screens outside. She's cornered. Finish it. Bet she stabs him. A reflection moved in the mirror behind me. Not mine. Someone else. I didn't have time to think. I ducked. The mirror exploded. Glass rained down as something crashed through it. A shape, a figure, arms swinging, something heavy slamming against Victor's side. A body, someone else. The other prisoner. They weren't dead. Victor barely had time to react before the stranger tackled him, knocking him back into the hallway. The sound of their struggle filled the space. Grunts and sharp gasps. The unmistakable thud of bodies colliding against walls. I didn't wait. I ran. Out the door. Down the hall. Past the screens. The cameras, the watching eyes. The countdown had hit 0. The alarms blared. Somewhere, something was coming undone. A door ahead. Heavy. Metal. I shoved against it with everything I had. It gave. And suddenly, I was outside. The air was freezing, the wind cutting against my skin like knives. The city stretched ahead, dark and empty, but real. I ran. Behind me, inside that cursed warehouse, something was collapsing, the system breaking, the game falling apart. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. The stage was burning, and I was finally off it. And this time, I was never coming back. You wake to the scent of damp stone and something else, something sickly sweet that clings to the air and fills your lungs before you are fully conscious. Your body is heavy, limbs sluggish, a dull ache pulsing beneath your skin, radiating from places you don't understand yet. Darkness presses against your eyes, thick and unyielding, and when you try to move, you realize something is wrong. Your arms, no, your wrists are bound, not with rope, not with something rough that would cut into your skin, but with silk, soft, delicate, yet unbreakable. Panic surges through you, quick and sharp, but before you can struggle, a voice cuts through the darkness. Shh. It is soft, almost gentle, the voice of someone who has spoken to dolls for too long and forgotten how to address the living. A whisper, a lullaby, a hand pressing down on your chest to keep you still without ever touching you. You mustn't move too much, ma chérie, the voice continues, a sigh wrapped in words. You'll ruin the performance. Your breath catches, the fear clawing at the edges of your mind, sharpening into something more solid, more real. You force your eyes open, blinking against the dim glow of candlelight. The room is cavernous, the air cool and damp, the walls rough stone stretching high into shadows. It takes a moment for your vision to adjust, to take in the strange, terrible beauty of the space around you. A stage. You are on a stage. A wooden platform, its surface smooth and worn, stretching out beneath you. A single gilded chair sits behind you, ornate and antique, its legs curled like the delicate fingers of a dancer mid-motion. Heavy red velvet curtains frame the edges, swaying slightly as if stirred by an unseen breeze. But it is what surrounds the stage that makes the breath catch in your throat. They are watching. Rows of figures seated in old theater chairs, their faces pale in the flickering candlelight, their bodies stiff, their hands poised in unnatural positions. At first, your mind tricks you into thinking they are an audience, spectators waiting for a show to begin. But then you see the strings. Thin, glistening strings stretch from their limbs to the ceiling, disappearing into the darkness above. Their heads tilt at odd angles, their eyes frozen open, glassy and unseeing. They are not watching. They are not alive. A strangled sound rises in your throat, but before it can become a scream, you feel it. Your own strings. Not real strings, not silk, but something inside you. Something wrong. You try to move, but your limbs respond with an eerie foreign resistance. Your arms do not bend the way they should. Your legs do not hold weight the way they used to. The ache you woke up with sharpens into something unbearable, a deep twisting pain that turns your breath into short, gasping bursts. And then you understand. Your body's not your own anymore. Your joints, your elbows, your knees, your wrists have been taken apart and put back together again. A sob claws its way up your throat, your stomach twisting with nausea, with horror, with something too overwhelming to name. You feel the weight of yourself in pieces, the unnatural slack in your limbs, the way they only hold form because someone has arranged them that way. Shh, the voice murmurs again, and out of the shadows he steps forward. Lucien Moreau. He is tall, dressed in black, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, his hands gloved, his posture as poised as the dancers he has stolen. His face is kind, in the way that marble statues are kind. Cold, empty, crafted to mimic warmth without ever having truly possessed it. He looks at you the way an artist looks at an unfinished painting, with something like admiration, something like ownership. There now, he says, tilting his head as he watches you struggle against the limits of your own broken body. You mustn't cry. This is a great honor. You can barely breathe, barely form a thought through the panic, through the searing pain radiating from every joint, but somehow you manage to force the words past your lips. What? What did you do to me? Lucian sighs, almost wistful, as he steps closer, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from your face with the gentleness of a father soothing a child. I made you perfect. You flinch away from his touch, or at least you try to, but your body doesn't move the way you expect. The motion is delayed, unnatural, your arm twitching as if it belongs to something else entirely. Lucian watches this with quiet fascination, his eyes alight with something you cannot name. You are my Odette now, he says, stepping back as if admiring his work. My swan, and tonight you will dance. The meaning of his words sinks in slowly, like ink bleeding through paper, staining everything it touches. He has done this before. He has done this to others. The bodies in the audience, the lifeless marionettes, the carefully positioned corpses. This is not the first performance, and it will not be the last. You are not a prisoner. You are a prop, and the show must go on. Lucian watches you with a patient kind of satisfaction, the way a sculptor might admire a block of marble before the first chisel strike, already seeing the shape within, already knowing how he will carve away the excess. He moves with precision, each step unhurried, each motion deliberate, as if he has done this 1,000 times before, as if the weight of your horror is nothing more than a familiar script playing out again. Your breathing is shallow, each inhale sharp, painful, like your ribs are caging in something that wants to escape. You try again to move, to pull your arm forward, to bend your knee, but the pain comes fast and brutal, blooming through your limbs like fire. There is a wrongness in your joints, something unnatural in the way your body shifts. Too loose, too unstable, as if your bones have been tampered with, disassembled and restructured into something that mimics human movement, but is not quite right. Lucian tilts his head, studying you, his expression unreadable. You mustn't resist, he says, his voice soft, almost kind, the way a teacher might correct a stubborn student. Your body is still learning. It is not used to its new limits. New limits. The words settle in your stomach like lead. You want to ask what he has done, how he has done it, how long you have been unconscious, but the truth is already curling at the edges of your mind like smoke, seeping into the spaces you don't want to acknowledge. You know what he has done. You can feel it in every fractured movement, in the unnatural looseness of your limbs, in the way your body obeys only halfway before hesitating, waiting for guidance, waiting for him. Because that is what he wants. Not just control, not just obedience, performance. Lucian moves to the edge of the stage, where a long wooden box rests just beneath the curtain. He unlatches it with a quiet, practiced ease, lifting the lid to reveal silk ribbons, delicate and gleaming in the dim candlelight. At first they seem beautiful, elegant, the kind you've tied around your ankles before a ballet, the kind that should symbolize grace. But when he lifts them, you see the thin wires woven within, the way they glint with something sharper, something metallic. Puppet strings. Your stomach lurches, the realization hitting like a blade pressed too suddenly to flesh. He isn't just dressing you up like a dancer, isn't just forcing you into a role. He is turning you into one of them, the ones in the seats, the ones who never move on their own. No, you whisper, the word slipping from your lips before you can stop it. Your voice is hoarse, strained, barely more than breath. But Lucian hears it. He pauses, looking at you with something almost like amusement. No, your throat is dry, your pulse hammering against the inside of your skull. But you force the word out again, stronger this time. No. Lucian sighs, shaking his head as if you are a child refusing to do something simple, something necessary. Marie, he says, his tone patient, almost disappointed. Do you know why Odette suffers? You don't answer. You don't trust your voice to hold steady. Lucian doesn't need a response. He steps closer, the silk ribbons trailing from his fingers, his expression turning thoughtful. She resists, he murmurs. She fights against what she is meant to become, and because of that, she is cursed. The words send a shiver through you, a deep, crawling dread that sinks beneath your skin and settles in your bones. Lucian reaches for your wrist, his touch gentle, careful, as he loops the first ribbon around it, tying it in an elegant knot. The silk is soft, but the wire beneath presses cold against your skin, a quiet promise of restraint, of control. I want you to be my perfect Odette, he says, securing another ribbon around your other wrist, his fingers moving with a careful precision that makes your stomach churn. But I will not force you. You must choose it, Marie. You must surrender to it. Your hands tremble, your breath coming faster now, panic rising in your chest like a tide you cannot hold back. And if I don't? Lucian meets your gaze, his eyes dark, unreadable. Then slowly he turns his head toward the audience, toward the rows of lifeless figures bound to their seats by invisible strings. The answer is clear. He will make you one of them, a permanent dancer, a performer who never leaves the stage. Your breath shudders, your mind racing for something, anything, any way out. But Lucian is already lifting the final ribbons, already reaching for your ankles. The dance is about to begin. Lucian hums softly as he tightens the silk ribbons around your ankles, the melody eerily familiar, something from an old ballet, something you've danced to before. His fingers work with the precision of a man who has done this countless times, adjusting the knots, ensuring the wires beneath the silk rest snug against your skin. There is no malice in his movements, no indication that he sees this as cruelty. If anything, his expression is one of quiet satisfaction, the pride of an artist putting the final touches on his masterpiece. You try to breathe evenly, to keep your body still as he works, but every instinct screams at you to run, to fight, to do something, anything, but you know you can't. Your legs are not your own anymore, not in the way they used to be. Every shift, every motion feels unnatural, disconnected, like a marionette waiting for its puppeteer to give it life. The ribbons are tight now, snug against your wrists and ankles, trailing off into the darkness above, disappearing into the unseen mechanisms hidden within the catacomb ceiling. The candlelight flickers, making the silk shimmer like something alive, like veins pulsing beneath your skin. Lucian steps back, tilting his head as he examines his work. Then he reaches for something behind him, something just out of sight. A small wooden control bar, the kind used in traditional marionette performances. It is elegant, hand-carved, the strings stretching from it, connecting to the ribbons that bind you. You go cold. I find that control is an art form, Lucian murmurs, running his fingers along the wooden edges of the controller. It is not enough to move the body, one must capture the soul. He lifts the bar slightly, his grip firm yet delicate. The movement is so small, so subtle, that for a moment you don't feel anything. Then your arm rises. Not of your own accord, not by your own will. The pull is gentle at first, a slow, measured lift that forces your fingers to extend, your wrist to bend at an unnatural angle. It is precise, controlled, as if Lucian is testing the limits of his creation. You try to resist, try to pull your arm back down, but there is no strength in the limb, no way to fight the force guiding it. Lucian watches closely, adjusting his grip on the bar. Your other arm lifts, your fingers trembling as they spread into an elegant but forced curve, the position eerily reminiscent of the opening pose of Swan Lake. Your stomach twists, nausea rising as you realize what is happening, what he is doing. He is making you dance. The strings tug at your ankles next, guiding one foot forward, then the other. Slow, deliberate steps that drag you across the wooden stage in an unnatural glide. The pain in your joints is distant now, muted beneath the sheer horror of your body's betrayal, beneath the awful knowledge that you are nothing more than a doll in Lucian's hands. The seated figures in the audience remain motionless, their glassy eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight, their expressions frozen in eerie, silent approval. You wonder how many of them danced before you, how many of them were guided across this same stage before their strings became permanent, before they could no longer resist. Lucian hums again, a slow, haunting tune as he moves the controller in careful, practiced motions. Your body responds without hesitation, bending into an arabesque, your arms lifting gracefully despite the sheer terror clawing at your mind. The ribbons tighten, holding you in place, balancing you on the tips of your toes, forcing your body into the illusion of control even as you feel more helpless than ever. You see, Lucian says softly, watching you with admiration. Perfection. Your chest heaves, your breath ragged, but you cannot stop moving. A turn, a slow, elegant spin that should feel effortless but does not. Your limbs bending and shifting in ways they were never meant to. Lucian guides you gently, like a maestro conducting a delicate symphony, his eyes gleaming with something reverent, something bordering on love. The performance continues. You do not know how long he makes you dance. Your body is exhausted, your muscles screaming beneath the forced grace, your mind a haze of panic and pain. The candles burn lower, their wax dripping onto the stage like melted flesh. The catacombs hold their silence, their walls unmoved by your suffering. Then finally Lucian stops. Your limbs collapse the moment the tension in the strings releases, your knees hitting the stage with a dull thud, your body trembling with exhaustion. Sweat clings to your skin, the scent of damp stone thick in your lungs, but you barely notice. Lucian exhales slowly, as if coming down from something euphoric. He sets the controller aside, stepping forward, crouching beside you. His gloved hand brushes against your cheek, pushing damp strands of hair away from your face with something almost affectionate. You were magnificent, he murmurs. You want to scream, you want to sob, but all you can do is breathe, your body too weak to do anything else. Lucian smiles, satisfied, and in the flickering candlelight, the audience watches, their lifeless expressions locked in eternal applause. You are still on the stage when he lifts you again, your body no longer yours, your limbs obeying a force you cannot fight. The exhaustion sits deep in your bones, a heavy, sinking weight, but Lucian's strings do not care for your fatigue. His hands, steady on the wooden control bar, lift your arms with precision, guiding you back onto your feet as though you are nothing more than a marionette waiting for its master's command. Your knees shake, but the strings hold firm. You are standing again, whether you want to or not. Lucien steps toward you, his expression calm, his pale eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. He is not breathing heavily, not even winded, though he has just forced you through an entire performance against your will. His hands are steady, his posture poised, as though this was not an act of control, but rather an artistic endeavor, a creation unfolding exactly as he envisioned. Dancers often resist at first, he says, tilting his head as he watches you struggle to remain upright. But in time they learn, they surrender. You can feel the strings pulling against your wrists, the silk pressing into your skin, the cold wires beneath biting with the faintest hint of pressure. Not enough to cut, not enough to wound, but enough to remind you that they are there, that they are stronger than you. Lucian steps behind you, his fingers adjusting the tension on the control bar, testing the weight of your movements. Your shoulders tighten as your arms lift again, slow, deliberate, curving into a pose you should know well. But the motion is wrong, disconnected from the natural grace you once had. The pain radiates through your body in slow, pulsing waves. The ache in your joints, a cruel echo of whatever he has done to you. You are not moving. You are being moved. Lucian hums softly, a familiar melody, something from Swan Lake, something you have danced to 100 times before. But the sound is different here in this place. It is colder, emptier, carrying a weight of something you do not want to name. He steps forward, guiding you with small, subtle shifts of the strings. Your body obeys, though every instinct screams at you to resist, to fight. But there is no fighting this. There is no undoing what he has done to you. You were meant for this, Lucian says quietly, his voice close to your ear now. You may not see it yet, but I do. I saw it the moment I first watched you dance. His words send a shiver through you, bile rising in your throat as memories surface. Memories of the ballet studio, of rehearsals, of the feeling of eyes on you when you walked home at night, the faint unease that had lingered at the edges of your awareness. Had he been watching you even then? Studying you? Choosing you? You have the perfect form, he continues, his voice smooth, hypnotic. Your lines, your balance. But you lacked something before. You lacked submission. True dancers, true performers, they do not simply move. They allow themselves to be moved. The strings tighten slightly, pulling you forward, forcing you into another step. Your body obeys before you can stop it, your muscles aching from the strain of staying upright, from the sheer exhaustion weighing down every inch of you. Lucian turns you gently, positioning you like a doll being arranged in a shop window. You are so close to perfection now, he murmurs, more to himself than to you. But there is still resistance. His fingers tighten on the control bar. Your knee bends suddenly, forced into an unnatural dip, your leg folding beneath you in a way that sends a sharp burst of pain through your nerves. You gasp, the sound escaping before you can hold it back, your body trembling as you try to steady yourself. Lucian sighs. You do not trust me yet. The words are almost mournful, as though this is a great disappointment to him. He crouches slightly, his fingers brushing against your cheek, his touch unnervingly gentle. I will fix that. The words send a bolt of cold terror through your chest. You do not know what he means, but you know it will be worse than anything he has done so far. Lucian steps back from you, his fingers still resting lightly on the control bar, his eyes locked onto yours with an expression of quiet contemplation, as if he is considering his next move, his next masterpiece. You can feel the strings tighten, the silk ribbons pressing against your skin like a lover's embrace, like shackles disguised as something beautiful. Every muscle in your body is screaming for rest, for stillness, but he does not allow it. You are his dancer, and the performance is not over. He tilts his head slightly, listening, as if waiting for something. The only sounds in the vast chamber are your uneven breathing, the faint rustle of fabric as the lifeless audience sits frozen in eternal observation, and the distant dripping of water from some unseen crack in the stone above. Time has lost its meaning here. There are no windows, no clocks, nothing to mark the passing hours, only the dim, flickering candlelight casting long, twisted shadows against the cold walls. Then he speaks. You are almost ready, he murmurs, adjusting the strings slightly, making you shift on your feet, making your arms lift once more into a delicate curve. But there is still resistance in you. That is not how this ends, Marie. The way he says your name makes your skin crawl. You don't want to hear it from his lips, don't want to exist in the version of reality he has created, where you are nothing more than a figure in his twisted ballet, a puppet waiting to be perfected. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the pain, a flicker of something ignites, not surrender, not fear, but anger. He has taken everything from you, your body, your movement, your control, but he has not yet taken your mind. Lucian lifts the control bar again, guiding you into another slow, elegant motion. But this time, you do something different. You let yourself fall. It is not much, just a shift in weight, a tiny loss of balance that forces the strings to work against you. To compensate, the silk bites into your skin as they pull taut, the unseen wires straining to hold you upright. Lucian frowns slightly, his hands adjusting their grip, his mind already working to correct your movement. You do it again. This time, you let your head drop forward as if in exhaustion, your body sagging slightly. The response is immediate. Lucian tightens the strings, forcing you upright again, his control over your body absolute. But you have felt it now, the way he reacts, the way he adjusts. And in that reaction, you find your opening. You take a breath, steadying yourself as best you can, and then, without warning, you collapse completely. The pain is immediate and brutal, your knees hitting the wooden stage with a sickening crack, your body pulling against the strings in ways they were not designed to. The control bar jerks violently in Lucian's hands as he struggles to compensate, his fingers tightening in an effort to force you back into position. But you do not let him. You thrash against the wires, against the silk binding you, twisting your body in unnatural, erratic ways, making the tension unbearable, making it impossible for him to control all of you at once. You hear something snap, not from your body, but from above. One of the strings gives way, the pressure too much, the mechanism above unable to handle the chaos you have created. Lucian's breath catches, his posture stiffening as the control bar jolts in his grip. He is not used to this. He is not used to resistance. For the first time since this nightmare began, you have unsettled him, and that is all you need. With a final desperate effort, you twist again, using what little strength remains in your limbs to send yourself tumbling sideways off the stage. The world tilts, the candlelight blurring, the scent of damp stone rushing toward you as you fall. The strings jerk violently, yanking Lucian's hands forward, his grip slipping for just a moment, just long enough. The control bar crashes to the floor beside you. The wires slacken, and suddenly your body is yours again. The pain is excruciating, but you do not stop. You drag yourself forward, your legs barely able to hold your weight, every motion a battle against the agony pulsing through your joints. Lucian is behind you, cursing under his breath, moving quickly to retrieve the control bar, to regain his hold over you before it is too late. You do not let him. Your hands grasp at the first thing you can reach, a rusted metal candelabra standing near the stage, its wax-dripped frame solid beneath your fingers. With a cry that is equal parts pain and fury, you heave it upward and swing. The metal connects with Lucian's temple with a sickening thud. He staggers, his breath hitching, his hands flying up instinctively as he reels from the blow. You do not wait, you swing again, and again. The third strike sends him crashing to the floor. His breathing is ragged now, uneven. Blood pools beneath his head, dark and glistening in the candlelight, soaking into the cracks between the wooden planks of the stage. His fingers twitch slightly, reaching for something unseen, for control that is no longer his. You step back, the candelabra slipping from your trembling hands, your breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The silence that follows is deafening, stretching through the vast chamber, filling the space where Lucian's voice once was. And then, slowly, you turn. The lifeless figures in the audience remain as they were, their frozen expressions unchanged. But in the flickering light, in the heavy stillness of the catacombs, you could almost swear the weight of their eyes is gone, that the invisible strings binding them have finally loosened. You do not wait to find out. You run. Your body screams in protest, every step sending fresh waves of pain through your shattered limbs. But you do not stop. You stumble past the stage, past the rows of silent spectators, past the heavy curtains and the darkened corridors beyond. The catacombs stretch before you like a maze, twisting and endless. But you do not let the fear consume you. Somewhere above, there is a way out. Somewhere above, there is light. And you will find it, because the performance is over, and the strings are broken.